Ordered out to print and back on file.
Without objection, the amendments are adopted. We will now recess the regular session and convene the joint convention. Everyone, please take your seats. Governor Edmund G. Brown Jr. is in the chamber. I am appointing a joint committee to escort Governor to the rostrum. Please retire to the rear of the chamber as your name is called. Assembly members Caballero, Carrillo, Kansan-Chu, Cooley, Dolly, Irwin, and Thurmond. Senators Bell, Galgiani, Hernandez, Jackson, Lara, and Newman. Members and guests, please welcome the 39th Governor of the great state of California, the Honorable Edmund G. Brown, Jr. We have several other honored guests here today as well. Please welcome the First Lady and Special Counsel to the Governor, Ann Gus Brown. Please also welcome the constitutional officers of the state of California, Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom. Attorney General Javier Becerra. Secretary of State Alex Padilla. State Treasurer John Chung. State Controller Betty Yee. Superintendent of Public Instruction Tom Torlakson. Insurance Commissioner Dave Jones. From the Board of Equalization, Chairwoman Diane Harkey. Member George Renner. Member Jerome Horton. And Member Fiona Ma. Also joining us today are the California Supreme Court Justices. Please welcome the Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court, Tani Cantillo-Sakaue. Associate Justice Ming Chin. Associate Justice Carol Corrigan. Associate Justice Goodwin Liu. Associate Justice Mariano Florentino Cuellar. and Associate Justice Leandra Kruger. I also want to welcome our Consular Corps representing a number of countries that we have strong partnerships with. Welcome. I also want to welcome all other distinguished public officials and special guests who have joined us in the chamber today. It is quite an honor to be part of Governor Brown's 16th and final, we think, State of the State address. I'm assuming it's the final one, but if there's anyone who could convince voters to extend term limits, it's our governor. He says he's done. I don't know. I want to thank the governor for his leadership. I know we're going to have another great year ahead. This is also the last State of the State for Senate Pro Tem leader Kevin De Leon. The Governor Pro Tem and I have accomplished quite a bit together over the course of the past few years, and we're gonna all miss working together. I'm also very excited to be working with our next Pro Tem, former Assembly colleague Tony Atkins, who's here today. But now, please welcome Pro Tem Kevin De Leon.
Thank you much, Mr. Speaker, colleagues, friends, family, as well as fellow Californians. I think that we have so much to be proud of, so much to be thankful, yet we all know collectively, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, we have still much work to do, without question. I want to offer my deepest and my sincerest appreciation to, quite frankly, who I call the greatest governor in the United States of America, Governor Jerry Brown. For his extraordinary service, because under his leadership and collectively with the leadership of the Speaker as well as myself and every single member here on both sides of the aisle, this chamber as well as the Senate, but specifically under his leadership, we overcame the worst recession since the Great Depression, since 1929. That's no easy feat in the largest state in the Union. And now we stand on firm footing, ready to confront the challenges that lie ahead of us and invest in our greatest asset, which we all know is our human asset, which are our people, the citizens of the great state of California. I can say this, I know you've heard this ad nauseum from me, that I've never been prouder to be a Californian, because today we fiercely defend our state as well as our nation's highest ideals and values. It has been my greatest honor to lead, of my life, to lead the California State Senate. To my colleagues, both Democrats as Republicans in the Senate, you are the greatest, and I want to thank you very much for the partnership that we have forged together. Speaker Rendon, working together, we have actually accomplished quite a bit. Unlike any other legislative body in the country, including Washington, what we have done together on a whole variety of issues can't be measured at all. And to the great governor of the greatest state and the greatest country in the world, again, it's been an extraordinary opportunity to work together. Us, Speaker Rendon, Speaker Tony Atkins, when she was a speaker as well, who I worked with when I was the leader and the leader of the Senate, as we worked together. It's been an incredible experience. The partnership that we have forged together, quite frankly, has made history. And together, we're securing a better future for the greatest state in the Union, the Golden State, our state, the state of California. Now, it is my honor. Please welcome our Lieutenant Governor, the Honorable Gavin Newsom.
So it's taken me about 8 years to figure out you don't come to these things to listen to the Lieutenant Governor. So it's in the spirit of brevity, thankfully, right? In the spirit of brevity, let me quote Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead. It's only an ex-mayor of San Francisco can possibly get away with that, who I think said something that really personifies this historic moment. He said, "You don't want to be the best of the best. You want to be the only one that does what you do." I think that's a wonderful way of describing our governor. So it's in that spirit, that this historic moment in our state and in the life of this extraordinary man, that I am proud to introduce to you the one, the only, sui generis, Governor Edmund G. Brown Jr.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, as my father used to say, I accept the nomination. Who knows? Good morning. As our Constitution requires, I'm here to report on the condition of our state. Simply put, California is prospering. While it faces its share of difficulties, we should never forget the bounty and the endless opportunities bestowed on this special place, or the distance we've all traveled these last few years. It's now hard to visualize or even remember the hardships, the bankruptcies, and the home foreclosures so many experienced during the Great Recession. Unemployment was above 12%, and 1.3 million Californians lost their jobs. The deficit was $27 billion in 2011. The New York Times, they called us the coast of dystopia. The Wall Street Journal saw the great California exodus. The Economist of London pronounced us the ungovernable state. And the Business Insider simply said, California is doomed. Even today, you will find critics who claim the California dream is dead. But I'm used to that. Back in my first term, a prestigious report told us that California had the worst business climate in America. In point of fact, personal income in 1975, my first year as governor, was $154 billion. Today, it has grown to $2.4 trillion. In just the last 8 years alone, California's personal income has grown $845 billion, and 2.8 million new jobs have been created. Very few places in the world can match that record. That's one of the reasons why confidence in the work that you're doing has risen so high. That contrasts sharply with the abysmal approval ratings given to the U.S. Congress. Certainly our on-time budgets are well received, thanks in large part to the lowering of the two-thirds vote to a simple majority to pass the budget. But public confidence has also been inspired by your passing, with both Republicans and Democratic votes, pension reform, and don't minimize that. That was a big pension reform. May not be the final one, but it was there, and you did it, Republicans and Democrats. Workers' compensation reform, another vote with Republicans and Democrats there. The water bond, the rainy day fund, and the cap and trade program. And by the way, you Republicans, as I look over here and look over there, don't worry, I got your back. All these programs are big and very important to our future, and their passage demonstrates that some American governments actually can get stuff done, even in the face of deepening partisan division. The recent fires and mudslides show us how much we're all affected by natural disasters and how we can rise to the occasion, the local level, the state level, and with major help from the federal government. I want to especially thank all the firefighters, the first responders, and the volunteers. These brave men and women answered the call to help their fellow neighbors, in some cases, even when their own homes were burning. Here we see an example of people working together, irrespective of party. The President himself has given California substantial assistance, and the congressional leadership is now sponsoring legislation to help California, as well as the other states that have suffered major disasters, Texas, Florida, and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. In this regard, we should never forget our dependence on the natural environment and the fundamental challenges it presents to the way we live. We can't fight nature. We have to learn how to get along with her. I want to say that again. We can't fight nature. We have to learn how to get along with her. And that's not so easy. For thousands of years, this land, now called California, supported no more than 300,000 people. That's 300,000 people. And they did that for thousands and thousands, some people say as long as 20,000 years. Today, 40 million people live in the same place, and their sheer impact on the soils, the forests, and the entire ecosystem has no long-term precedent. That's why we have to innovate constantly and create all manner of shelter, machines, and creative technologies. That'll continue, but only with ever greater public and private investment. The devastating forest fires and the mudslides are a profound and growing challenge. 8 of the state's most destructive fires have occurred in the last 5 years. Last year's Thomas Fire in Ventura and Santa Barbara counties was the largest in recorded history. The mudslides that followed were among the most lethal the state has ever encountered. In 2017, we had the highest average summer temperatures in recorded history. Over the last 40 years, California's fire season has increased 78 days. In some places, it's nearly year-round. So we have to be ready with the necessary firefighting capability and the communication systems to warn residents of impending danger. We also have to manage our forests and our soils much more intelligently. Toward that end, I'll convene a task force composed of scientists and knowledgeable forest practitioners to review thoroughly the way our forests are managed and suggest ways to reduce the threat of devastating fires. They'll also consider how California can increase resiliency and carbon storage capacity. Trees in California should absorb CO2, not generate huge amounts of black carbon and greenhouse gas as they do today when forest fire rages across the land. Despite what is widely believed by some of the most powerful people in Washington, the science of climate change is not in doubt. The national academies of science of every major country in the world, including Russia and China, have all endorsed the mainstream view that human-caused greenhouse gases are trapping heat in the oceans and in the atmosphere, and that action must be taken to avert catastrophic changes in our weather systems. All nations agree except one, and that is solely because of one man, our current president. Here in California, we follow a different path. Enlightened by top scientists at the University of California, Stanford, and Caltech, among others, our state has led the way. I'll enumerate just how. Building and appliance efficiency standards, renewable electricity reaching 50% in just a few years, a powerful low-carbon fuel standard, incentives for zero-emission vehicles, ambitious policies to reduce short-lived climate pollutants like methane and black carbon, a UN-sponsored climate summit this September in San Francisco, and the nation's only functioning and comprehensive cap-and-trade system. I'll shortly provide an expenditure plan for the revenues that the cap-and-trade auctions have generated. Your renewing this program on a bipartisan basis was a major achievement and will ensure that we will have substantial sums to invest in communities all across the state, both urban and agricultural. The goal is to make our neighborhoods and farms healthier, our vehicles cleaner, zero emission, the sooner the better, and all our technologies increasingly lowering their carbon output. To meet these ambitious goals, we'll need 5 million zero-emission vehicles on the road by 2030, and we're going to get there. Believe me, we only have 350,000 today, so we all got a lot of work. And think of all the jobs and how much cleaner our air will be then. When you passed the cap-and-trade legislation, you also passed a far-reaching air pollution measure that for the first time focuses on pollutants that disproportionately affect specific neighborhoods. Instead of just measuring pollutants over vast swaths of land, regulators will zero in on those communities which are particularly disadvantaged by trains, trucks, or factories. Along with clean air, clean water is a fundamental good that must be protected and made available on a sustainable basis. When droughts occur, conservation measures become imperative. In recent years, you've passed historic legislation to manage California's groundwater, which local governments are now implementing. In addition, you passed, and more than two-thirds of the voters approved, a water bond that invests in safe drinking water, conservation, and storage. As a result, we'll soon begin expending funds on some of the storage we've needed for decades. As the climate changes and more water arrives as rain instead of snow, it's crucial that we're able to capture the overflow in a timely and responsible way. That, together with recycling and rainwater recapture, will put us in the best position to use water wisely and the most efficient way possible. We're also restoring the Sacramento and San Joaquin watersheds, protect water supplies, and improves California's iconic salmon runs. Finally, we have the California Water Fix, a long-studied and carefully designed project to modernize our broken water system. I'm convinced that it will conserve water, protect the fish and the habitat in the Delta, and ensure the delivery of badly needed water to the millions of people who depend on California's aqueducts. Local water districts in both the North and the South are providing the leadership and the financing because they know it's vital for their communities and for the whole state. That's true, and that's the reason why I've persisted. Our economy, the sixth largest in the world, depends on mobility, which only a modern and efficient transportation system provides. The vote on the gas tax was not easy, but it was essential, given the vast network of roads and bridges on which California depends and the estimated $67 billion in deferred maintenance on our infrastructure. Tens of millions of cars and trucks travel over 330 billion miles a year. The sun's only 93 million miles away. The funds that SB 1 makes available are absolutely necessary if we're going to maintain our roads and transit systems in good repair. 25 other states have raised gas taxes. Even the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has called for a federal gas tax because the Highway Trust Fund is nearly broke. Government does what individuals can't do, like build roads and bridges and support local bus and light rail systems. This is our common endeavor, by which we pool our resources through the public sector and improve all of our lives. Fighting a gas tax may appear to be good politics, but it isn't. I will do everything in my power to defeat any repeal effort that gets on the ballot. You can count on that. I'm looking for that one Republican. A brave man. All right, since I've talked about tunnels and transportation, I'll bring up one more item of infrastructure: high-speed rail. All right. I make no bones about it. I like trains. I like high-speed trains even better. So did the voters in 2008 when they approved the bond. Look, 11 other countries have high-speed trains. They're now taken for granted all over Europe, in Japan, and in China. President Reagan himself said in Japan on November 11, 1983, the following, and I quote, "The state of California is planning to build a rapid-speed train that is adapted from your highly successful bullet train." Yes, we were. And now we are actually building it. Takes a long time. Like any big project, there are obstacles. There were for the Bay Area Rapid Transit System, for the Golden Gate Bridge, and the Panama Canal. I'll pass over in silence the time it took to build the Bay Area Bridge. That was almost 20 years. And by the way, it was over budget by $6 billion on a $1 billion project. So that happens. But not with the high-speed rail. We got that one covered. But build it they did, all those projects, and build it we will, America's first high-speed rail system. One link between San Jose and San Francisco, an electrified Caltrain, is financed and ready to go. Another $1 billion with matching funds will be invested in Los Angeles to improve Union Station as a major transportation hub and fix the Anaheim corridor. The next step is completing the Valley segment and getting an operating system connected to San Jose. Yes, it costs a lot of money, but it's still cheaper and more convenient than expanding airports, which nobody wants to do, and building new freeways, which landowners often object to. All that is to meet the growing demand. It'll be fast, that high-speed rail will be fast, it'll be quiet, it'll be powered by renewable electricity, and best of all, it'll last for 100 years. After all, you guys are gone. Already, more than 1,500 construction workers are on the job at 17 sites, and hundreds of California businesses are providing services, generating thousands of job years of employment. As the global economy puts more Americans out of work and lowers wages, infrastructure projects like this will be a key source of well-paid California jobs. Difficulties challenge us, but they can't discourage or stop us. Whether it's roads, or trains, or dams, or renewable energy installations, or zero-emission cars, California is setting the pace for the entire nation. Yes, there are critics, there are lawsuits, lots of them, and there are countless obstacles. But California was built on dreams and perseverance, and the Boulder Path is still our way forward. In addition to infrastructure and physical investments, California spends huge sums for services which affect people directly, such as education, health care, and our criminal justice system. In education, after seeing 30,000 teachers laid off, spending has dramatically recovered. increasing by $4,600 per student, $31 billion overall. We'll also be able to completely fund the local control funding formula, which directs money to those schools with the greatest challenges. For decades, school districts had widely disparate funding until the Serrano against Priest decision mandated equal funding for all children. Now, with our current formula, the most disadvantaged districts will get substantially more, not just equal funding. Importantly, this year's budget proposes to link spending with the local accountability plans so that parents can see how the additional spending supports English learners and students from low-income families. Look, it's no secret that kids from more privileged backgrounds generally do better on standardized tests. But the answer is not more micromanagement with intrusive state laws. Learning takes place in the classroom, and that's why our first job is to support teachers and give them the training and the freedom to teach as they know best. With respect to higher education, it's clear how much of our prosperity depends on the intellectual contributions of our institutions of higher learning. National leaders come from all over the world to visit California's most innovative companies, companies that are filled with highly educated and creative men and women, many of whom graduated from our public colleges and universities. Although there's always a struggle for funds, I want to point out that since 2011, the state has increased its annual support of higher education by $5.8 billion. And that's on an annual basis from now on. That is $1.2 billion for UC, $1.6 billion for CSU, $2.4 billion for the community colleges, and $623 million in additional financial aid. And that's not chump change, $5.8 billion. Even with so many of our students attending college, there's still 2.5 million Californians between 25 and 34 who are in the workforce but lack a post-secondary degree or certificate. These men and women often go out of state and pay high tuition at for-profit institutions to improve their skills and employability. For this group, I want to create the California Online College, so these overlooked Californians can get the training they need conveniently and at very low cost. You can applaud that, I know you will. And this won't compete with bricks and mortar schools or the existing community colleges or UC or USC. This is for people out of the workforce who have no other way. And we want to bring it right to their homes so they can get ahead like everybody else. When it comes to health care, California has boldly embraced the Affordable Care Act by enrolling 5 million more people into our Medi-Cal program and 1.3 million into the California Health Exchange, Covered California. These are far-reaching These are really far-reaching moves, but are largely dependent on tens of billions of federal dollars that would have been taken away by the Congress had the effort to repeal and replace succeeded. Thank God for John McCain, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins. Along with the Democrats, they prevailed and protected the health care for tens of millions of Americans. Finally, I want to say something about public safety. Nothing is more fundamental than an abiding sense on the part of people that they can enjoy their lives safe and secure, free from crime. Good neighborhoods, good schools, and good jobs all contribute to healthy and safe communities. But there still is crime. lots of it, in many cases, quite serious. To combat crime, among other things, California has created an extensive prison system that has changed quite substantially and grown over the decades. In fact, it grew so fast, it became so crowded, that the United States Supreme Court issued an unprecedented order requiring drastic changes. To give you a sense of the magnitude of the problem, here are some of the facts. In 1970, California imprisoned 125 persons per 100,000. That number now stands at 331. Their corrections budget then was about 3% of the general fund. Now it's 8.9%, about $12 billion. Yet last year, the number of reported felonies was actually lower than it was in 1970. In 1965, the California Penal Code had about 234,000 words. I actually got some people to count them. Today, that number has grown to 1.2 million. By comparison, the Ten Commandments run just under 300 words. And the Ten Commandments, there's still 10. In California, there are more than 5,000 separate criminal provisions specifying what is criminal, what the penalty should be, what enhancements should be added, and what credits might be earned. Much of this has changed, I'd say changed over and over again, and churned over the decades as the legislature has enacted endless new crime laws and the voters have approved one ballot measure after another, usually, but not always, adding more time in prison. My plea is relatively straightforward. Take time to understand how our system of crime and punishment has evolved, how other states and countries have devised their prison systems, and what changes might we now make. I urge that instead of enacting new laws because of horrible crimes and lurid headlines, you consider the overall system and what it might need and what truly protects public safety. Certainly, we need more mental health and drug treatment programs, and better training and education. Those we're getting, but more is needed, particularly hope. Hope, as you know, is one of the theological virtues, along with faith and charity. When a human being gets a 20 or 40-year sentence, as tens of thousands do, incentives to reform weaken and hopelessness and violence take over, making prison gang influence all the more powerful. That's why recent measures are so vital, which allow the possibility, and only the possibility, of earlier parole and milestone credits for those who turn their lives around. Equally important are the correctional officers who walk the halls and put their lives on the line in direct contact with all manner of inmate. Their job is to keep the place safe, never an easy task, and to create an atmosphere of respect and order and foster a spirit of rehabilitation whenever possible. There are thousands of others who work in the prisons who also deserve our support. It's all out of sight, but profoundly important because inmates will be returning to their communities. Most of them will, and we want them to be as reformed and rehabilitated as possible. For the rest, there's much we can do together before this year ends. And these are truly exciting times, full of possibilities, but also full of danger. Just this morning, the preeminent Science and Security Board of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists moved the minute hand of the doomsday clock 30 seconds closer to catastrophe. It is now 2 minutes to midnight, as close as it was at the height of the Cold War in 1953. Our world, our way of life, our system of governance, all are at immediate and genuine risk. Endless new weapon systems, growing antagonism among nations, the poison in our politics, climate change. All of this calls out for courage, for imagination, and for generous dialogue. In recent days, hundreds of thousands took to the streets in cities across America to participate in the Women's March. At the same time, activists championed the cause in our nation's capital of those young people we call the Dreamers. In all this, California was in the forefront, showing the way. But there's much more to do, much more to do. All of us, whatever our party or philosophy, have a role to play in defending and advancing our democracy. Our forebears set the example. As you may know, my own great-grandfather, August Schuckman, in 1849, sailed to America on a ship named Perseverance. He persisted against all the odds and made it to Sacramento 3 years later. And yes, we too will persist against storms and turmoil, obstacles great and small. The spirit of democracy never dies. It's alive in this chamber, in the hearts of Californians, and in people throughout the world. Let this be a great year for California, for our nation, and for our future. Thank you. Keep going. I'm in no hurry. Nowhere to go.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for everything. Without objection, the Governor's State of the State Address shall be printed in the Journal as a separate appendix. We will adjourn the Joint Convention sine die. We are back in regular session. The session schedule is as